normal little reminder and disclaimer that the purpose of this class is to really help you work with professionals, not to certify you as a design professional in solar design or so forth. Although we may look at it and come back and say, hey, it might be interesting to create a certification program for ecological solar designers. Basically, not to have you do design for install, but instead to have you look at how to place solar design in an ecological setting. That's something that not many people are talking about. So let's jump straight into thinking about transportation and why we're talking about it tonight. And I guess the reason I thought it was so important to talk about is if you look at total energy consumption of just about any developed country, you'll notice that transportation energy use takes up a very sizable percentage of the total energy used for all purposes by that civilization. For the United States, it happens to be about 28%, and just used for transportation. So if you're thinking about how to design a sustainable and regenerative system for people to live in, and you don't pay attention to transportation, then you're probably not going to be very successful. You've got to think about that as part of your overall way of approaching energy use in your system. So, since we are talking about something that takes up about a quarter of all the energy consumption in a lot of the developed world, you're going to have to address it if you're going to operate in the real-time energy budget of the sun, which is one of our goals as ecological solar designers. It's to be not running off of mined out of the ground fossilized sunlight, but instead to be running on a real-time energy budget the sun is giving us. And one of the problems is that a lot of our transportation infrastructure, both in rural and in urban areas, was designed during the height of the fossil fuel age, where the assumption was that there was a huge amount of fossil fuels available at very low cost, and those fossil fuels are incredibly energy dense. So it allowed us to, by making use of that and drilling up a lot of those fossil fuels, it allowed us to create very energy intensive transportation infrastructure. And you start looking, we talked a couple of weeks ago, we started talking about conservation, about exactly how much energy is in, say, a gallon of gasoline. And when you go back and think about it for a minute and remember that an average car today in the US can go something over 30 miles, going 70 miles an hour. That is a lot of energy when you're thinking about moving several thousand pounds that fast against air resistance. That's a lot of energy. And because we've had so much energy and it's been so readily available, we have created whole setups in our urban, suburban, and peri-urban areas that depend upon very inexpensive transport of people and goods in order to operate. And that's something we're going to have to really think about if we're going to get to something that can operate on the real-time budget of the energy budget of the sun and not be dependent upon fossil fuels. And because if we stop and we look at it, what you're going to see is that there is almost